It's really focusing, so go on ahead and get started here. Give 1 minute, but yeah, people might keep rolling in. So the title of this session is UX They Expect, how contemporary design patterns can inform the customer experience of government services. Yeah, there's a bunch of people. All right, so I've got 3 parts to cover today. So part 1 is kind of the problem, some examples of some current civic technology, where and how civic tech is kind of lagging behind and why it matters. Part 2 is going to cover what we're doing about it. So we're going to talk a little bit about the 21st Century Idea Act or Idea Act is in the A, it's like ATM machine, delivering a digital first public experience memo and what the requirements mean. And then part 3, we're going to dive in. We're going to look at some examples, see exactly what we're talking about. So hopefully you will understand what's required and recommended of sites in civic tech. We're going to assess some patterns, components that are well built and accessible. And we'll start to think about how to keep an eye out for examples, outside your industry that may translate well. So who am I? My name is Molly. I work at Last Call Media. I've been there for over 5 years. I'm a designer. Ooh, there we go. And that's my cat. You give me a platform, you gotta look at my cat. All right, so part 1, the problem. And, I try to say this in the nicest way, but, government sites and services are sometimes not as good as they could be. I'll go right to my home state of New Hampshire. This is the site right now.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's sunk in enough, I think. This is an example of a ride booking site. Definitely looks quite different than Uber, Lyft, other things that we've become used to. Contemporarily, I kind of blocked out the names and stuff to preserve the privacy, but this is one I actually did some research on, and it'll come back up. These are some UI online applications. Certainly a little bit different than you're used to seeing or applications online. Again, this is California UI. Even this one on the left that's a little more modern is still kind of dated. It's, 2020, so maybe they've made vast differences. But, California had a big effort during COVID to sort of update their UI program. It's in another thing that'll come up, Recoding America, the book by Jennifer Pollock, who started Code for America, wrote about her efforts to help modernize their UI system. So satisfaction with digital government service in the U.S. lags behind those of private sector by nearly 20%, which is kind of a bummer. The sources down there at the bottom, there's a great Deloitte study on the digital citizen, so a bunch of statistics I'm going to use throughout from that survey. And trust in government is correlated with their satisfaction. So you can see the more satisfied they are with the service, the more that they trust it. And with government, we obviously want people to trust that their data is secure and use the services where they're available. So this kind of says, this is kind of pulled right from the thing, but it respondents who are satisfied with agencies' digital services also tend to rate the agency as highly trustworthy for protecting their personal data. And, they're not satisfied, there's lower scores. So this implies that better customer service and experience could improve satisfaction and increase trust. If we're going to build digital services, we want people to convert to those and use them. And people do want to interact with their government online. The preference changes as you get more local. I don't want to go renew my car registration at the town hall probably, but, other interactions, you want to use a website. And call centers are still pretty popular, which sort of surprises me. And so why does this matter, right? That they're kind of bad, like people could just use them and kind of figure it out and get through it, and if not, use the call center, right? So Jacob's Law, which is one of the laws of UX, that users spend most of their time on other sites. This means that users prefer their site to work the same way as other sites that they already know. And as we just looked, the newhampshire.gov site does not really look like other sites I use on a daily basis. And so just to take a look at some of the most visited sites, and I cut it off before it got inappropriate, it did get weird. But, Google, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, X, which is now Twitter, Baidu, Wikipedia, Yahoo, those all have, Yahoo's got quite a bit of ads, but it still kind of looks contemporary. Looks like other things that we're used to seeing. And we are chronically online. 62% of people use the internet 7 hours a day. That's crazy. I mean, I work on the internet, so I guess that makes sense. It's 8 hours a day. I work 8 hours a day. And 92% access the internet via a mobile device. For a lot of folks, mobile is the only device they have to access the internet. And so particularly in government, we want to be meeting them with a good experience where they are with what they have, which is, mobile. Okay. So there's a mismatch between some government services and what people are seeing and using elsewhere online. Again, why does it matter? Well, bad experiences can cause participation gaps. When people are eligible for a service, we want them to be using it. We want them to get the help they need. And FRAC, I forget exactly what that stands for, but they're an organization that tracks stuff like the SNAP eligibility. And there's a SNAP gap of around 8%, or 18%. That's 18% of people that are eligible for the service and are not taking advantage. There are overwhelmed customer service centers, call centers. They've reduced call centers because, the internet exists, but if the internet doesn't work and they have to call the call center about the internet, then you're not really solving that problem. And again, 92% of people are on their mobile phone. You want to meet people where they are, which is, looking at stuff on the phone on the toilet. So what are we doing about it? Hey, that'd be great. If I could renew my car registration from the toilet, that would be great. So what are we doing about it? Enhance. Enhance. So this is the 21st Century IDEA Act, and it was put forth by Congress 2017, 2018. And what does it say? It requires all executive branch agencies to modernize their websites, improve customer experience, and standardize transition to centralized shared services. So that's login.gov is a centralized shared service. You can use it to log into a couple things so far. Modernizing sites, we'll come back to that, and improving customer experiences. But I sort of put digitized services and forms and e-signatures as a sub-bullet of that because I feel like it kind of falls under the general modernization. All right, and how do we implement that, right? That sounds like a good idea. Let's do it. Enhance. Enhance. So this is the Delivering a Digital First Public Experience. It's a memorandum, and it was released pretty recently, September 2023. And what does it say? It provides guidance to agencies on how to design and deliver websites and digital services to the public and assist agencies as they continue to implement the 21st Century Integrated Digital Experience Act. So it's some guidance about what modern means. And so let's dive in. What does modernize mean? What does improve customer service mean? Well, it means that the site or service or app should be accessible to people of diverse abilities, should have consistent visual design and agency brand identity. It should have content that's authoritative and easy to understand. Should have information and services that are discoverable and optimized for search. Should be secure by design and secure by default. It should be user-centered and use data-driven design. It should have customized and dynamic user experiences. And it should utilize mobile-first design that scales across devices. Like I said, many, many, many people are primarily accessing the internet on their mobile device. I know we all probably work on desktops every day, but that's kind of not the norm. And so what makes a good experience, right? This is the list of from Nielsen Norman Group, who are a leading UX consultancy. Visibility of system status. You want a match between the system and the real world. You don't want to dial online right to go down because you're used to the volume on your car button going up when you turn it right. My car's old. You want the user to have control and freedom. You want to have consistency and standards throughout your products. You want to have error prevention. You want to utilize recognition rather than recall. You want people to remember what they've seen rather than have to try and figure it out. Flexibility and efficiency of use, that's pretty straightforward. Aesthetic and minimalist design. Mostly, you can only go so minimal when you're talking about, sort of government services that need to have quite a bit of content scaffolding and stuff. And you want to help users recognize, diagnose, and recover from errors. And obviously, you want to have some help and some documentation about it. So, this is another set of things, but this book is really great. This is written by Lou Downe, who I think started the GDS, which is the UK.gov design department. I'm halfway through this book, but it's really great so far. And so they have a set of principles as well. So, and the service design describes also the entire service, the journey through multiple applications. So this wouldn't apply just to one website, but to, I need to renew my car. So I find my town website, I go to the town clerk's thing, I go to the app that helps me renew it, and then I get an email. So that's the whole service, and they want to, make sure that that's smooth, people know where they are throughout. So, we want to be easy to find. They found out that in the UK, they were using some language for different services that just didn't map with what people had as their mental model of the service or what they were Googling to find that. Clearly explain the purpose, set the expectations a user has so they're not disappointed, enable them to complete the outcome they set out to do. And that might mean, what you can do within your step. You want to work in a way that's familiar. It should require no prior knowledge to use so that, people can hop on and on board and get going. It should be agnostic of organizational structures. That sounds like a British thing. But yeah, you should be able to make it usable without getting too caught up in everything. Require the minimum possible steps to complete. Be consistent. You want to have no dead ends. If you have a site and you have a feedback form, you want to make sure that opens in a new tab so they don't fill out the feedback form submitted and then lose the place that they were on the first site. You want it to be usable by everyone equally. We already hit that, but that's always good to keep talking about accessibility. You want to encourage the right behaviors from users and service providers, respond to change quickly, clearly explain why a decision has been made, and make it easy to get human assistance. So part 3, let's dive in. So let's examine each of the 10 modernization points through the lens of some private sector sites and apps that are some doing them well, some not doing them as well. We'll talk about the different things that are successful and not, and then some civic technology where they've maybe started some of this effort or not, and what we can learn from it. So first, accessible to people with diverse abilities. I think people know about the American Disabilities Act, but in 2019 they did specify that does apply to web content due to a lawsuit for Domino's Pizza. I don't know if anyone heard of that, but everyone should have the right to have a tummy ache from Domino's Pizza. So accessible, these are kind of the top level WCAG, however you want to say it, principles. So it's got to be perceivable. The information and user interface components should be presentable to users in ways they can perceive. Operable. So components and navigation must be operable by all. Understandable. Information on the operation of the UI must be understandable. And robust. It must be robust enough that it can be interpreted reliably by a wide variety of users and assistive technologies. So this is one that came up again and again when I was Googling most accessible sites. So I disagree with the text over the image. I know they have like a shade over that, and it probably makes it pass for accessibility, but I still don't love text over images. But, they've got these really great buttons, super high color contrast, both from the background and the text on the button. So pretty good example. Another one is this wicked cute and often sold out toy shopping cart. I finally found it for my niece. I was very excited. So this is the focus state. You can see as I've tabbed through it, tabs on the shopping cart to go to the page, the product page, and then as you tab, you can add it directly to cart. But this focus state is pretty light. I doubt it has the adequate color contrast from the background. And I don't know what it does on the target red. I don't think I saw it on the target red, but I think if I remember correctly, it's still just those gray dots. And so that's probably not accessible and not really an adequate focus state. Usually what I'll do is I'll layer 2 lines, so light color or dark color, no matter what you're on, it's visible and it's solid and it's bold. And then this is the drop down site, which is kind of neat. So you tab over and you hit enter on the search box, and then you tab down and a close button does appear so you don't get stuck in the menu. I'm not going to pretend to be an accessibility expert. I don't know if it's a best practice to not have that close button always available, but it was just something that I thought was kind of interesting. And so for accessibility, in government, this is obviously a super, super important thing, like a legal requirement, but also, we want to serve all of our constituents. So gov.uk, again, one of the probably top tier design systems, they sort of led this government design UX, UI thing. And so they do a great job of, disclosing that the new WCAG criteria affects the component, that they maybe haven't checked it yet. But they do, have listings of the components in the design system and how they apply, or if they need updates. And the US web design system does that as well. They have a new way of disclosing on each component page if they've been tested, when they've been tested, what wasn't passing. So yeah, very important. So here's Georgia.gov. I think this is just a beautiful site. Makes me sad that Georgia's doing better in New Hampshire than New Hampshire in websites, but so this, really beautiful colors. I assume that they call that peach. Lovely. But this services button here, that's really nice looking. But the color of the button on the white background is not dark enough to pass for color contrast. And the text on it does, but I also think this is the hover state. I also think that like the default state with just the 2 or 3 pixel thing probably isn't the best. So something can be really, really, nice looking and still kind of have some misses. But yeah, really, really nice. They're getting close. I'm sure there's a lot of, the text is large and lovely. They're using great content here, but those little basics are so easy to check. So the next point is consistent visual design and agency brand identity. Everyone here probably knows Google. Google probably knows all your social security numbers. You see a Google service, you kind of know what it is. You know it's them. You probably feel safe using it. Maybe I might feel too safe. But we also want to be cautious of the aesthetic usability effect. Users, and this is another one of the Nielsen Norman things, I believe, this is a regular UX law. They often perceive aesthetically pleasing design as a design that's more usable. And I've got Cash App up here, which I don't know. Every time I'm like, okay, there's a big number in front of me. I don't know what to do with this. This is way too simple. And it's money, I want to know how much money is in there. And so I feel like opening to this home screen is just a little too simple. They're trying to make it a little too easy. GameStop stock. I own some. I didn't sell it when it went all the way up. Oops. But another one is Robinhood. It's super simple. It's sort of almost gamified, the stock, but that's not really appropriate for their for a financial services website. I use Fidelity for some stuff, and it's a lot more robust. And just because it's not super minimal, and that's why I kind of disagree with that point of UX best practice, is that it's a better experience because I can read more about the stocks and understand the financial choice that I'm making, which is like I said, it's a serious industry, much like something when you're interacting with government. You want to make sure it's right, and you want to have all the information to do so. So here's a good example. So login.gov, they've started this single sign-on for all federal government access. They've got this nice little logo. They've got a type style that's pretty unique. I'm sure it's still using like Gotham or whatever their font is. But then you go to Social Security, and right there you can recognize it's pulling the Social Security serif font, so I guess it's not. But it's got that nice lock logo. You can tell that it's legitimate, and it also makes it easy to sign up right there as well. And same with USA Jobs. You can see that login is right there next to USA Jobs, and it's showing it as the link to your sign-in with the logo, which I think is pretty nice. So, even though you're not on the login.gov site, you can access several government services and see that the brand identity is there, feel secure, feel safe. All right, I brought it up earlier, the United States Web Design System. Another great way. Do I need to hit next? Another great way to have consistent and good visual design is to use what's available to you. And the United States Web Design System is doing some great stuff. They also have monthly webinars that are super informative. Sometimes they're a little internal, but lately they've been a lot about their usability and accessibility testing on components, which has been really great. And, they have a pretty good ability to test with users that have different abilities, which is always good to test with actual real people. So yeah, highly recommend signing up for those webinars once a month. And so this is kind of what it looks like. It probably looks a little familiar because, it's used by a bunch of agencies. It's open source. Anyone can access it. And like I said, they're great at sharing their working process. There isn't an official Figma file, but even on their site, they recommend one that some agency has made as the most up-to-date version. And so, often if I'll need a component, I'll go and see if they've built it before, because It's probably been checked for user experience. It's probably been checked for accessibility. And even if you change some stuff, you know that the bones you're building it with are really strong. And so here's their showcase on their site. So these are all sites that are using United States Web Design System. And you can see they've customized it. The Seed Fund is using yellow. It doesn't have to be this red, white, and blue thing. They're using the yellow. NASA's got the black background with the light blue kind of thing going on. But, again, they know that the components they're pulling, even if they change them, and they will have to recheck them. I don't know if that green button over there on the PubMed would pass. They should still check for accessibility on their own building process, but it's a really good start. All right, so the next one is content that is authoritative and easy to understand. So the Plain Writing Act of 2010 requires federal agencies to communicate clearly in a way the public can understand. The act states that plain writing means writing that's clear, concise, well organized, and follows other best practices appropriate to the subject or field and intended audience. So it is acknowledging that some government stuff has, some knowledge that you might need ahead of time or some jargon that might be unavoidable, but generally, you want to use plain language. And so this is from plainlanguage.gov. There are many techniques you can use to achieve the goal. So you want to use reader-centered organization. So lay out your page in a way that makes sense. That might be on their service journey. That might be, user testing categories to see how to organize the information on the page. You want to use you and other pronouns, use they, use them. Don't, just use common sense there, I guess. And that the you thing is active voice. You want them to feel like they are part of this and that they can participate. So you want to use short sentences and paragraphs. The rule I've kind of heard is like 7th, 8th, 9th grade reading levels. There is a site, what's it called? I should have written it down. There's a site where you can plug in your writing and it'll tell you. Yeah. What is it?
I don't know.
Hemingway?
It's a different Hemingway. Thank you. Yeah, Hemingway. And so that's been really helpful to just check yourself before you write these super long sentences, and you might be using language that you don't realize is overly complex. So yeah, common everyday words. You want to use easy to follow design features as well. And if you're using a good design system, it'll set things up in the correct hierarchy. But you want to use headers for sections, clearly delineate where content starts and ends, and so these are some, again, there's a pattern here. I'm kind of starting with the public sector, going to government on each point here. So TurboTax, let's start by getting to know you. They take this thing, filling out your taxes, that's pretty big and scary, and they break it down and they make it super easy. And it's just like, did you buy a house this year? No. Did you have children this year? No. And you just go through answering these really organic questions that feel like they're from a familiar, a friend. Same with this Hinge sign up over here. So it's just, what's your name? It's not like this big long form that's like first name, last name. Because, dating is already kind of vulnerable and they want to make it super easy to get on board with that. And so this is, again, gov.uk. I know I have them on this pedestal, but it's so good. So this is a comprehensive single source of truth. This is a great page. And I would love some illustrations or photos, but a lot of the stuff on their site is pretty straightforward, just title, description. And this is a single source of truth about visas and immigration. And you can kind of see all the situations are covered. There's probably more below, but I took a nice little screenshot. It's using plain language, family in the UK, not like I have a relative that lives here. It's just a much more familiar language. And, it's the phrasing mimics what a real person might search. Like, how do I work in the UK? And there's, Commonwealth citizens. So that's, people know that they're part of the Commonwealth versus British nationals. It's kind of searchable. They spell dependent differently. Interesting. It's a little bit less common, I think, in public sites. But information and services that are discoverable and optimized for search. So SEO is like a big word to sell stuff. So that's why I don't love diving into this with the public sector too much. But again, you want a single source of truth, consistent language and phrasing. You want to call a service the same thing in multiple places. You don't want to be using internal language that the audience might not understand. And here's another one. This is Canada.gov or Canada.ca. So they're probably stealing this directly from gov.uk. But same thing. This site is super searchable. This is the homepage. So it's got kind of everything you might be coming there 4, and at the top there's just direct links to the most requested pages. And again, do your 2023 taxes, not 2023 tax completion form or something. They're using language that's pretty searchable. All right, the next one is secure by design, secure by default. Obviously, we want the government to be careful and secure with our data. We also want the private sector to be careful with our data. Respondents do trust government agencies generally more, but there is a high level of trust for healthcare providers and financial institutions in the private sector. I already picked on Cash App and Robinhood there, but we'll use Fidelity again as a good example. They kind of, really push you into two-factor authentication. Most apps do now anyway. Same with this MyChart. This is some other hospital, but I am part of the Mass General, and they use MyChart, and it's a good app, and it's pretty secure. It always checks that it's me multiple ways. And then, by design, you also want people to know visually where they are. And so, again, this is the banner for the state of Georgia, official website of Georgia, official website of the U.S. government, of Oregon, and of North Carolina. They're all kind of using the same thing. This is probably based on United States web design system. They're all super similar. Even if they're not literally using the code, they're definitely influenced by the layout. And then, that to come back to login.gov, they're using multi-factor authentication, because you can either use text message or an authentication app. I'm sure that there's a lot on the back end that makes it secure. I won't pretend to be a developer. But, you also want to give visual cues and do the proper checks where we can design them into the flow. So you want to be using user-centered and data-driven design. I put this up here because the Duolingo owl was trying to kill me. But they do a lot of user research. I did read a really interesting article recently, too, about how, when they're trying to get you to onboard to paid, they'll flip the call to action based on the activity you just did. Oh, you don't want to get ads? Go to premium. Oh, you want to do more, if you run out of your daily amount of lessons you can take, oh, you can do unlimited tests. They also do a lot of research into language learning, which is really what that link is about. But they just redid their app and did a lot of research. And they're really interesting because it's sort of academic and learning research in addition to UX. And Spotify, a lot of people disagree with the changes to the desktop one. They made it kind of feel like the mobile app, but they do a lot of research. I kind of like the old one, but they are a good example of, doing research and updating your service based on what people want. So this is where I told you that ride booking site was going to come back. That's not Uber. So we did some testing on this, and one of the tasks was asking folks to book a recurring ride. It was actually at a different component, but this component has the same problems. We said book a ride on a Tuesday and Thursday, and everyone booked a ride on a Wednesday and Friday, because our mental model for a calendar is that it starts on Sunday, at least in the United States. So this was causing problems, mistakes. These are rides to doctor's appointments, so that's pretty devastating if they have to wait another 6 months to get in with whatever doctor. And it's a super vulnerable population. And so, why not this is a material design input, this is USWDS, but there's also one that's from, material design. There's a lot of free open source components out there that are already built. So, why reinvent the wheel in a way that people can't use it as well? So, they've already, like I said, they've already done the research. You can look up every component for USWDS and then make sure that it's been checked. They do the testing. They have the data. Use it. Or do your own testing like we did. And, pretty interesting. People want customized and dynamic user experiences. So another one very much like Spotify is Netflix. We'll both be, my boyfriend and I will both be logged in, and we'll both have Downton Abbey suggested to us, and we'll have different covers because it knows what we each like. And I chose Downton Abbey just because I love it. And another one, is Spotify, again, to come back, the Wrapped. Everybody loves Spotify Wrapped. Everybody's stealing Spotify, the concept of a Wrapped. People like to know about their own behavior, and now that we have the data available, it's pretty interesting. And there's also, just technology being dynamic, so across Kindle stuff. I don't know if anyone uses Kindle. I could read on one device, open it up, and it says, do you want to move forward to where you were on your other device? It's really great. So people kind of expect those sort of things to, if you start a process, to pick it back up where you were, and know where you were if you were, logged in to an account and stuff. So this is an example of the gov.uk one login, which is sort of, their login.gov. I had to kind of break up the screenshot because they designed mobile first, as you should. And so they've got your email subscriptions at the top. They've got other services you've used, so you can see what you've recently used and the date that you used it. That's also a great security feature to know, like, I have not logged into this in 6 months. Why does it say May? That's problematic. And there's other call to action sort of for other services you can use with the one login, right there all on the page. Wait, did that have the one thing I noticed as I was looking at this, they had to change the crown because he wants to use the Tudor crown and Elizabeth was using something else. So I just thought that was kind of funny. They have to slightly change the gov.uk logo for the new king. All right, I hinted at this a moment ago, but mobile first design that scales across varying devices. 54% of people, this is from analytics.gov, are accessing government sites on their mobile device. Vastly Chrome on iOS, which is kind of funny. But yeah, I think I would say that's even, I don't know, higher. I feel like because it's a government site, people are going on desktop. I think the average is much higher for private sector sites. My other favorite thing from analytics.gov is that everyone is checking their packages all the time. That is the top listing. Every single time I look at it, it's USPS, so you're not alone. Quick sidebar there. And 45% of federal websites are not mobile friendly. You got to work on a phone. You've got to be able to work on a phone. And so, if those half or the half people are looking at a desktop, that'd be great, right? But that's not the reality. And so here's some private sector examples. It's almost Mario Day, so that's an exciting example. But, Etsy has the search box right there, shop now, and those big call to action buttons. Zappos, I think they're kind of using, I kind of Googled for the best examples versus trying to get away from like what I personally like. That image is a little big on mobile in my opinion, but you can still reach it. And Nintendo has a bottom menu on mobile, which I think is really interesting. As a person with small hands, the iPhone 14 is a little tough. And so having that search right at the bottom. That said, Uniqlo did a thing like this where they put the menu at the bottom, but even on desktop, and it's very confusing. It took me forever to find out how to just look up women's sweaters. It's very confusing. And so here's a good example of a city, Kansas City, Missouri, that has a really nice mobile site. I don't know if it was designed mobile first, but it works really well. So, you've got the top things that you might be looking for, accessing City Hall. You want to get your recycling and trash pickup day figured out. And then there's just a quick resource pickup where you enter your address and it tells you all the resources available to you. I don't know if it's based on county or ward or whatever. But great job, Kansas City. Good job. Don't think that I forgot about the forms. So we want to digitize services and forms and accelerate the use of e-signatures. So what does it mean to digitize services and forms? Make them available to the public in a digital format. You want them to be available in a digital channel in a manner that maximizes self-service. So like I said, you don't want people trying to do it online and then calling the call center anyway. That doesn't really help anyone. And you want to not require a wet signature, and in-person, proofing requirements for completing forms. I don't know how it is now, but I got my passport a while ago. You have to go to the post office still, and it's a whole thing. So things like that would be nice to be able to do online. Although I think you do have to sign your passport in pens. And so only 2% of federal government forms to date have been digitized. And that means offered as a dynamic online form, not just a fillable PDF, because, Acrobat also is, I think it's paid. It's really tough to fill out an online PDF without the paid version of Acrobat. So that could be a pretty big barrier for folks. I actually was just chatting downstairs with the table next to us, and the IRS has released a beta version of being able to fill out taxes online directly on their website, like most other countries in the world do. So, we'll see if TurboTax lobbies that to death, but it'd be pretty cool to be able to just do that directly on the IRS site and not pay like $80. So yeah, digitizing services and forms. So this is a Slack dialogue, and again, it's using really good, like pretty good design for the form fields. You've got a drop down, you've got placeholder text, you've got help text underneath, and the label clearly on top. The submit button is clear. This is Google Material Design. We don't love a hover label where the label hops up into. Does this pointer work? Oh, it kind of does. So we don't love where the label hops up from the placeholder up into here. That's a little bit confusing and can be not the best for users. But they still, this is kind of a good example because they have all the states. They have inactive, the focus state, activated, they have a hover state, an error state, and a disabled state. And again, I'm not going to pretend to be an accessibility expert, but the rule with disabled fields, forms, buttons, things is usually to show it but make it clearly disabled. We don't want to just kind of like remove options. And okay, again, so gov.uk, love them. Beautiful form field designs here, and you can see all that development help. I think this is from the GitHub. So they also have scaffolding there to help folks. This is USWDS. Look at that beautiful blue input button with the focus state on it. The error is super clear. And it has a error message that's clearly tied to the error that was made in the correct box. And then there's the success, which is kind of nice. I don't know that green would pass, but again, I'm sure they've tested or are testing. And here's another example. I kept making the car registration example, but that's one of those little things that could, take a huge burden off of some, local government or civic workers, like it's the town clerk in my town. So you arrive at this site, I don't know what else is under services, but you can renew online, and it tells you need your plate number, you need your registration class, you need the name, and you need a debit card. So right there it tells you before you even hit the renew button what you're going to need to complete this service, which is super great. It's given them a mental model of the process right away. Also, nice, accessible. That button is probably high enough contrast off the blue background, but the black text is probably high enough contrast on the yellow button, so it's pretty solid design here on this homepage, nice and simple. And so in the end, kind of look for inspiration everywhere, but always build with care and consideration. There's a lot of great examples out there, but that don't necessarily have the constraints of government, though I think everyone should probably be building accessibly and for everyone to be able to use. Again, everyone deserves the right to have a Domino's tummy ache. So yeah, let's modernize. All right. So this is the bibliography. I can also send this out, or if anyone wants to take a screenshot. But I mentioned the Good Services book. Again, I'm only halfway through it, but it's really, really promising. She was super important in starting service design as an industry. I mean, I think it kind of existed, but she sort of simplified it to this friendly way of working. The Government Digital Service, which is what she started or helped start. They have a podcast. They haven't uploaded in a while, but they have some pretty interesting stuff about design system, and they interview people at other agencies about the value of design system. Recoding America is pretty good. It gets a little nitty gritty about the, like I said, the California unemployment crisis at the beginning of COVID. But she talks a little bit about she worked on Obamacare a little bit when that healthcare.gov didn't really launch the best. And then this podcast. I linked this specific one, this content design one, because I think it's a really important conversation about how simple language doesn't mean you're dumbing it down or anything. It's just, you're talking to everyone, and you actually sound worse when you're trying to sound overly intellectual. And so it's a really great episode, but Awkward Silences is great. Anne showed me that, so thank you. But yeah, really great. All the episodes are awesome. There's some really good stuff. And again, that Deloitte study, the Citizen Survey, I took a lot of statistics from there, and analytics.gov, and then digital.gov, which is, I think, the home of USWD, of the design system, has that delivering a digital first public experience resource, and it's really helpful. It kind of goes through each point that you have to be updating and talks about it, and so I took a lot of the points from there as well to talk through. Are there any questions? Cat again. Don't. With the cat. Yeah.
When you talked about searchability, you compared it to SEO, but they're really opposite goals. The goal of SEO is I have this page I want you to go to so you can buy something from me. So when you search, I want you to end up there. The goal of the government site is that when you search for something, you find what you're looking for.
Right. That's why I kind of didn't want to dive into like good examples in the public sector, because I was like, all the goals of like SEO, like you said, is kind of trying to manipulate the user rather than surface the correct information. So that I did kind of brush by that one because it's a little sticky, because I'm just like, yeah, I don't know. Like, it's kind of like the Duolingo thing, right? They do a good job and they do research, but the research is to get you to pay, basically, to get you to sign up for the paid service. So, yeah, that's where sometimes it is hard to compare public and private sector, and like what is, the end result is them buying something, but our end result is them succeeding in something. So I guess if the means to the end are the same, doesn't really matter, but yeah.
Hi, my name is Brian. I work as a software concept accelerator, and I tend to struggle with balancing accessibility and aesthetic design when making products. So, like, in your experience, like, how do you balance it? Because it almost feels like they're at odds sometimes, where I can make it look pretty or I can make it accessible.
Definitely. I love your socks.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's definitely kind of one of the bigger problems and one of the frequent pushbacks that you get with accessibility. And like I said, that's not even my specialty. I just try to have a good amount of knowledge because I'm, working on products that it matters. It should matter on all products. And there's definitely been moments where I'm like, can you just let me use that color? It's just so nice. But often there's, if you just change the hex code a little bit, and I know sometimes with brand colors you can't do that, but maybe you can make a slightly darker shade that still feels like part of the family but passes. And I know what you mean. It can feel kind of like that. Those gov.uk examples feel kind of stark. They feel kind of boring. But you can put in illustrations. You just have to write really good alt text if they're important to the story that you're telling. And I think making text the appropriate size and using the right hierarchy, those are just good design principles. So I don't think that they're asking too much more there. But it is tough. I think it's just, I've just kind of learned to be like, well, we got to do it. So, how can we make this still look beautiful and also be compliant with everything we need it to? So definitely, I don't have an amazing answer to be like, well, you just do this and it looks great and it works great. There's definitely concessions you have to make, but I don't really think that we should even think about them as concessions. I try to just be like, well, now it's well designed. Visual is only part of what makes it good. So.
And it's beautiful to who, right? Because if you have trouble
Right.
reading it, it's not beautiful. If you have a disability.
Right, and I don't know if you've seen examples of people that have to zoom in really close. It's like, whoa, okay, that looks really bad. So yeah, just and trying to empathize, and I always test too with the Stark tools. I don't know if anyone uses Stark tools, but they have a pretty good Figma plugin. They even have a browser plugin, which is a really fun thing to show people of this is what the site would look like if you're colorblind, and this way, if you have no color. And so I use the Stark accessibility component or tester a lot to just sort of empathize and see what it would look like. And it just kind of helps me understand what other people might see. And so that it doesn't look terrible in any of the options and still is, contrast enough. And
So you're kind of touting the USWDS, and I'm wondering, and also Material UI. Wondering if you could give a comparison, or if you like one more than the other. If is Material UI just as accessible because they're also doing the accessibility testing for Google products, or?
My experience with material design is that often they aren't exactly following best practices. They sometimes make the aesthetic call, like in that floating placeholder button. And so I always still double check when I use that system. I think it depends. I've used material design using for projects that are more for nonprofits or private sector. When you're working with government, USWDS just kind of makes sense to use. It's really cool that they're both open source. It's really cool that you can access great libraries on Figma for all of them. Gov.uk has one too by all. I think it depends what you're looking for, but I would still always check, because if you pull a button from USWDS and you change the colors, it might no longer pass. or if you change the focus state, it might no longer work on a dark color, things like that. So I think no matter what, do your own checks to the best of your ability. Like I said, not everyone can be an expert in all of this, but yeah, I'm kind of learning to love the USWDS. They're a really passionate community, and they give away a lot of information too, which is really helpful. So vote free.
I'm curious, what is your issue with the floating placeholder button? Is it the motion of it, or is it the cluttering of information? Like, what is the accessibility challenge to that?
I think it's that, and again, I'm not an expert, but I think it's that the label isn't persistent. Like it changes and it moves. So imagine if you're zoomed in and you're zoomed in on the right side of that input box and it moves. You don't really know. And you also lose what was supposed to be in that button, right? If you do phone number and it floats up, and now you no longer have the example like, oh, is it 9 digits or do I have to put the 1 for the US? I don't know. So you kind of lose that wayfinding that placeholder text can give you if it disappears, it moves, and yeah.
It's also kind of changing, like it's putting a label instead of the placeholder is an example of the input versus the label is what the category is. It's kind of taking that, you're making me think of this right now. So like it's taking something that's meant for showing how to input and it's putting the label there. So that's kind of also a problem, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and there's a lot of little things with material design like that where it's like, gosh, this is beautiful and elegant, but probably not the best practice. Yeah, there was, in that ride testing app that I was talking about, we did testing on users on mobile, and we did iOS, and then we did Android. And this company had just done the absolute minimum on these sites, so they basically used unskinned material design. And the time thing they had was an analog clock that the user had to move their thumb around. And yeah, dude. And now imagine that like you're a user with limited mobility. That's why you can't drive to your own appointments. And now you have to figure out how to get to 9:15 pickup with your thumb. So,
That's been on Screenreader too.
yeah, I don't know how one would do that. I mean, I guess there's probably a way. I didn't have an Android device to test. I mean, I could have borrowed my boyfriend's green bubble phone, but yeah, so some things like that where I'm like, material design, why? Like, yeah, that looks really cool and it's like fun if you're a fully abled, technologically confident person, but that's not everybody that's using your stuff. And Android worldwide is used much more than iPhone, so. Nothing about the cat? You don't even want to know her name?
What's her name?
Frankie. We call her Beanie. She's large. That's her heated bed. She's the light of my life.
About the boyfriend?
Oh. He knows where he stands. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
Just thank you for all of this. It's been,
Oh, yeah.
And in terms of like that problem of private sites are often looking to make a profit, that you can buy something. I see that a lot with Google Analytics, and it often doesn't feel like the right tool for us making a government website. I'm wondering if you have any recommendations for other tools to help with user-centered design, or if you just prefer user research that's more interview-based, or what are your tools and techniques for that?
Let's see. I do think actually that's more on the developers, procurement. The government uses what they use, so you kind of have to, and it's a years-long process to choose a new tool usually. But I forget exactly what I used, but they did have SiteImprove. They did have access to SiteImprove where I was able to see heat maps. And so we were looking at a site actually about that ride booking app. And the page that we were looking at on the site seemed like it would be for people, but it was actually for medical providers to like get them the rides, approve the rides. And so we used SiteImprove to look at, the hot spots. We saw everyone was clicking there and then kind of abandoning the journey. I do think they are using Google Analytics, but I don't know. I've seen Hotjar used too, but is it Hotjar? That was in a private sector site. So I think SiteImprove is the one that I've seen, but I don't have super broad experience. It definitely gave us a lot of interesting data that we could then test against. So we saw that and then we user tested and, we did interviews and people were like, yeah, I got onto this page and I didn't know what to do. I clicked the site and then it took me to some doctor thing. And we were like, okay, well, that hotspot is obviously what's happening to everybody. So I think, regardless of the tool, I think making sure that you're gathering the right kinds of data that you can sort of triangulate against either user testing, or we also had access to feedback forms from that page, which were vicious and mean and hilarious. But these people are, like they're a vulnerable population, and we've made it difficult to access a service that they need. And so we were able to sort of triangulate those kinds of comments against that hotspot and be like, okay, and then we talked to people, and it was, it was literally just a content change, and hopefully it's improved the experience for folks. Yeah.
So, do you want to go over like how you test the design for your websites? Because I know you referenced a couple of different things you were doing.
How much? What time do you have to be out of here? I'm
Yeah.
over. Oh, okay. User testing, but usertesting.com. But that was for some unmoderated tests I don't love. People that are signed up for user testing are often like in the higher income brackets, typically older. For some rounds of user testing, I've done just like research, which is really, really hard. Honestly, like manual reach out to folks and calling them again and again and again and being like, please talk to me, please don't stand me up. And then having a stakeholder on the call and they stand you up, so like it's much, much harder to do moderated tests with real people. But we got so much more out of talking to the actual audience and just watching them use their phones and their computers and hearing their stories about the things that they've been through. And I know that moderated testing is, one, it's more intense as the researcher. There's certainly stuff I heard that was super sad. It's more difficult because you just, like I said, I had to call people again and again and again and be like, please, really looking forward to meeting with you at 11, Jane. Please come talk to me. But, you can still learn a lot from unmoderated testing. I will say we sent out the test on usertesting.com, and I think they bought UserZoom, so now it's all one. And within like 10 minutes, we had like 5 answers or 5 tests done. And so, if you're looking for really rapid results, and you can pare it down, you can say, I want them to be in this area, I would like them to be this age. You can try to narrow by income and kind of get close enough that it's good. So it depends, if you're doing qualitative testing or quantitative testing. For something that was so specific, like this ride thing, we wanted to talk to the real people because it's such a complex, they're dealing with a physical medical system and an online service that is tied to this one form that they have to fill out, but which I don't know if it's digitized. I should have found that out. But yeah, it kind of depends what you're testing and, how much budget you have, how much time you have, and what you're looking to learn. But yeah, for those in-person moderated tests, Zoom, we just did Zoom and tracked everyone by Excel and tried to code their name so it was private and lock all the files down. And, we tested with Zoom and then we took notes in Docs, really using all tools that anyone has access to because user testing is also really expensive, the subscription. So yeah, you can make it work with a lot of different ways. Yeah. All right, so I'll get out of this room. I'm sure someone's waiting for it.
Thank you.
Feedback form. I'd love it if you filled it out. Be honest. Even if it's mean, like I said, I've read plenty of mean feedback. That's my email if you want to email me. If you want to come talk to me about any of these things. Call of Duty, Fortnite, anything. Just let me know. Dude, I get VRs all day.